the best way to find the animals without even looking. You just have to listen. Precisely, record and then listen. I've been successfully using this technique for a long time, and it has proven very useful. It's like having your ears present in the forest or in the meadow all the time while you're working, sleeping, or at home editing your wildlife photos. The best part of it? The animals have no idea you're recording them, so you're not bothering them or changing their behavior in any way. And at the same time, you're gathering very important information about them. From the hours at which they are active, to the distance and direction at which they are at, relative to the microphones, to the type of behavior that they are doing, feeding, hunting, resting, or maybe mating. I will divide this video into 3 main parts. First, we will discuss the location, then gear, and at the end, the setup process. Location. Okay, so the first step is to choose the area in which you want to use this 3 ears technique. I always scout the area first to get a feel for which animals could potentially be there. I pay attention to the footprints in the mud or snow, or the small trails that lead through the meadow and into the bushes. In the case of owls, I also look for the whitewash. Now, the next step is to choose where to put the microphones. When deciding that, you should pay attention to the noise pollution and from which direction it is coming, or at least from where it is the loudest, so you can try and avoid it as much as possible. I get the best results when I choose a spot that is located in a small valley between hills, as they block a lot of unwanted sound. Most of the time, the biggest problem is the traffic noise, because it travels very far, especially the lower frequency rumble, which will overpower the sounds of nature in your audio recording. This leads me to the other important point. You should look for streams and rivers and then avoid them as much as possible. You would think that a small stream running through the forest wouldn't be noticeable, but because of the high sensitivity of the microphones, the stream will be the only thing that you will hear. Just hours and hours of white noise. At this point, I should add that the amount of noise pollution that is still acceptable will vary from person to person. In the case of recording sound for discovering animals, this isn't as important as when you're recording the pristine nature ambience that you plan to use. For example, I use the ambience recordings as a background for my YouTube videos. Okay, back to the main topic. Now that you've selected the appropriate spot, you need to find a tree that is about as thick as this one here. Ideally, it should have some undergrowth around it, so it will be easier to hide the recorder and the battery. Now onto the equipment part. Gear. Generally speaking, you will need a microphone, a sound recorder, a battery, something to store and protect all of this, and something to attach the microphones to the tree. Now I will go into more detail about every piece of gear mentioned. Let's start with the microphone. There are many different brands, models, and types available. Specifically for the 3 ears technique, you will need a small diaphragm, omnidirectional microphone with high sensitivity and low self-noise. If you prefer to use a tripod or some other way of mounting the microphone, then you can choose from other types as well. Every microphone will work, as long as it's not too directional, too sensitive to the elements, and has a good signal-to-noise ratio. I am using the Mic Booster Clippy 272 stereo microphones. You can choose between the XLR and 3.5mm jack version based on the inputs that you have available on your audio recorder. Like I said, there are lots of options available and many ways of doing this, and it wouldn't make sense to talk about all of them in this video. It's simply too broad of a topic, so I'm only focusing on how I go about doing this. Next, you will need a digital audio recorder. Every recorder that can accept external microphones should work, but for the best results, you should look for low battery consumption, so that the power bank doesn't run out of power too quickly, and ability to use external power. Support for high-capacity memory cards, so you can record for at least a few days in a row. Good signal-to-noise ratio, plenty of gain in combination with clean preamps is ideal. Compact size. You can use bigger ones, but they will be harder to hide. I've successfully used the Zoom H5, H8, and F3 so far, with F3 of course delivering the best results. If you have the need and resources for it, you can also look for recorders such as Zoom F3, F6, or Tascam Portacapture X8. They offer what is called a 32-bit recording. If you're interested, go check out any of the videos here on YouTube explaining this feature. I will just explain it more simply, in plain English as best as I can. Most recorders let you choose between different bit depths at which you will record the sound, for example 16-bit, 24-bit, or less often 32-bit. Essentially, this number tells you how wide of a loudness range you can record without losing information or clipping. With 32-bit, you get such a wide dynamic range that it's practically impossible to clip your audio. I could describe the difference between 24 and 32-bit with JPEG and RAW photos. RAW allows you to capture and, later in post-production, recover much more details in the shadows and highlights compared to JPEG. It's similar to 32-bit. If you record the signal too hot and go over 0 dB, you don't actually clip the audio because of the wide dynamic range. In your editing software, you just lower the gain settings and thus recover all the peaks that went over 0 dB. This feature has already saved me a few times. When you set the gain level on the recorder, you tell it how loud or quiet it should record the sound. For very loud environments, you set the gain level low, and for quiet nature ambience, you must set the gain pretty high. This can lead to a problem when an animal gets really close to the microphone and makes very loud sounds. This is, of course, a great opportunity to get a really clean recording of this animal, but you've set the gain for quiet, more distant sounds, and the animal is very close and thus much louder. With 32-bit, you just recover the peaks that went over 0 dB, and you have a perfectly usable recording. A pro tip would also be to use the inline preamplifiers like Triton Audio Fathead or Cloudlifter. What they essentially do is boost the signal coming from the microphones before it reaches the recorder without adding any additional noise. This helps you if you're recording extremely quiet ambiences or if your recorder doesn't have enough clean gain. Cool, enough about the recorders. Next, you will need a way to power the equipment. Internal batteries on most recorders won't last more than a day or two, especially in colder weather. I use a large power bank that keeps my recorder alive for a week or longer. Also, I can give you a very useful tip here. When looking to buy a power bank for this purpose, you should make sure it doesn't have a standby or auto-off function. This feature prevents self-discharge when the battery is not in use, but will cause you problems because the recorder is drawing so little power that the power bank won't even detect it and will just shut itself off. Now on to the next part of this topic. If you're going to leave this setup outside in nature, you have to somehow protect it from the elements and, well, people. There are many ways to go about this, so I will just describe what works best for me. I use an IKEA plastic box with a cover to store all the parts of the equipment. I put a soft microfiber cloth at the bottom and then insert all the gear parts. I also put a large silica bag in the box to prevent humidity from building up and potentially damaging the equipment. I put the cables through the small hole on the side of the box that I made and cover everything with another cloth. I do that to prevent the recorder and other things from moving inside the box. It adds another layer of insulation as well. When I close the box, I wrap it in a towel. I do this for two reasons. First, to further protect it from breaking or damage, and second, to add another layer of insulation. You want to insulate the box as much as possible, because you will trap inside all the heat generated by the recorder and battery, and in turn keep it from cooling down too much. This won't matter much in a warmer climate, but if the outside temperatures are low, it will greatly extend the battery life. I've also been successfully using the hand warming pads. I've put one inside the box and left it buried in snow for 3 days, and the battery still had a 15% charge when I picked it up. But please do be cautious, as these pads can get very hot and could potentially damage your equipment. As a last layer, I put all this inside a camouflage waterproof bag. Now that everything is ready, you just have to attach the microphones to the tree. I tried many different techniques, and for me so far, the best one is to use a stretch cord. I always bring a few different lengths with me so I can pick the appropriate one for any particular tree. For the most immersive stereo effect, you will want to place the microphones approximately 40 to 70 centimeters apart. This will ensure that each microphone will hear sounds coming from one side more clearly and louder than the sounds coming from the opposite side, thus creating a stereo effect. In practice, this will help you to better tell which way the sounds are coming from. Setup. I always start the setup process with location. Like I said, the best way is to just walk around and listen carefully to the surrounding sounds. You want to pick a location away from noise pollution and as close to the points of your interest as possible, a den, a bird's nest, etc. And then you pick a tree that is in a suitable position. Next up is gear preparation. I always take it all out of the backpack and lay it in front of me so I don't forget something. I connect the sound recorder to the power bank with a USB cable to provide continuous power. Then I untangle the microphone cables, pass them through a small hole in the box, and plug them into the recorder. I always check if the connector is all the way in, and in the case of XLR connectors, if they are locked in place. Then I turn on the recorder to check my settings. I usually record at 32-bit and 48 kHz. I already explained why the 32-bit setting is so awesome, and for the 48 kHz, I prefer this sample rate because it is more than enough if you are not recording sounds that are outside of humans' hearing range. For the 3 ears technique, a higher sample rate would only be needed for recording a certain bird calls and bats, but you would also need a microphone that can capture such high frequencies. Okay, I've already gone into too much detail. Back to the recorder settings. Now that everything is connected, I plug in my headphones to check if the microphones are properly connected and the audio is audible. I also look for any interference or other artifacts that might ruin your audio. This is a very important step because it's your last chance to fix any problems that might occur. The last thing that I do is turn the screen backlight off. This saves a lot of battery power that would otherwise go to waste. That's it. Now I click record, double check that it's actually recording, and push the record button into the hold position. This disables all other buttons, so something doesn't get unintentionally messed up. Cool, now all that is left is to put the recorder and power bank into the box, put the silica gel back next to it, seal or close the hole for the cables, and cover everything with another microfiber cloth. Now I close the box, wrap it in a soft towel, and put it inside the waterproof bag. Then I attach the microphones to the tree and make sure they are not going to move or fall out. Next, I have to attach the bag to the tree or place it somewhere near the tree. If possible, it's best to attach it above the ground to keep it safe from small animals, water, or humidity. The last step is optional, but can be of great help later when you're back at the computer, and that is to record a voice memo. I usually stand close to the microphones and say in which location I've set them, the current date and time, what weather we are having, and which microphone is left and which is right. This will take you a minute or two, but it will definitely save you in the future when you will be going through some old recordings trying to figure out where they were made. All done. Now I want to hear from you. Have you tried or even heard of this technique before? Have you tried using it in combination with a trail camera? Would you be interested in a video showing how I do the second half of the process back home at the computer? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.